Feeling like you're going to come out a winner? Okay, it's just connecting across. While we wait, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on any section of the test. Okay, great. We're connected across to YouTube Live. That's cool. Hello, everybody on YouTube. Nice to see you. Hope things are going well for you. Okay, hopefully those numbers will pick up. And okay, let's have a look in the chat. Who have we got? We've got John and Ginny Grace John, and Anju and Juan Vegas. Good. And Grace John. There's a few Grace Johns in here. There's lots of Johns. Amina, Siji. Cool, cool, cool. Right, guys, just before we begin, there may be a little technical difficulty. If my screen is blurry on your screen, you're going to have to watch this on YouTube Live. I'm going to paste the link for YouTube Live into the chat so you can watch it there, okay? Cool, we've got 90 people on YouTube Live. So I'm gonna do two things. First, I'm gonna limit the chat so you can only chat with me, okay? And now I'm pasting a link into the chat, which is the link to YouTube Live, and you'll have to click that if my screen is blurry on your screen, okay? Cool. All right, let's get started because I know you guys have a test on Saturday, I believe. Let's have a look at this. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Jay. I'm one of the expert OET teachers here at E2 Language. In this live class, I'm going to give you some last-minute tips. I understand that the test is this Saturday, so hopefully this presentation will help you just to sort of wrap your head around those final little bits and pieces that you need to know, the most important bits for 4 of the most difficult tasks in the OET. So let's have a look at these OET last-minute tips. We're going to focus on tips for writing, reading part A, listening part A, and speaking, because these 4 sections, rather, not 5, 4 sections are the most difficult in the OET. Reading part B is pretty straightforward. It's just multiple choice. And listening part B is also pretty straightforward. It's very similar to an IELTS listening task. Okay, so let's focus on these 4 difficult ones. First of all, let me just give you a quick overview of the writing section. This is what's going to happen. You're going to be given a set of case notes. These case notes will be profession specific. So if you're a doctor or a nurse or a vet or a physio, they will relate to your profession. You're going to have 5 minutes to read these case notes, okay? There's some things you can do in that reading time, which I'll get to in a second. Then you'll have 40 minutes to write either a referral letter, a discharge letter, a transfer letter, or an information letter. Most likely it's going to be a referral letter. That's the most common type of letter that you will receive on test day, okay? All right, so let's move now to these top writing tips. First of all, you need to read the, okay, I'm going to take you through these one by one in a second. You need to interpret the case notes correctly. You need to select relevant case notes. You need to organize the case notes logically. You need to transform the case notes accurately, and you need to write in the body of your letter between 180 to 200 words. So let's think about this tip here, which is probably the most important. Read the task. So just spend 20 seconds reading this task, please. Okay, the task, you can think of the task like, you know, when you're writing the IELTS or another English language test and you have to write an essay, right? And there's the question prompt. And the question prompt is the most important part, because if you write off topic, then you're going to lose marks for everything. You can think about the task in the OET like the question prompt. It's going to tell you several pieces of information which are critical, such as who are you writing to? What type of letter you're writing? what information you need to include, and why are you writing to this particular person, right? So let's have a closer look at this task here and go through those bits of information. So first, who are we writing to? Whoa, something's happened to my, just bear with me. Hold on, I've got a little technical fault. Something's jittering. My plugs are falling out. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, let's have a closer look at this task. So we're writing to Dr. Jason Roberts. Now, what is Jason Roberts' job? Well, he's a gastroenterologist. That's telling us a lot about what type of case notes we're going to select on test day. If we're writing to a gastroenterologist, if we're writing to a physiotherapist, we're going to be selecting very different case notes than a gastroenterologist. What about a dermatologist? We're going to again be selecting very different case notes depending on the profession of the person we're writing to. What else can we see from this task? Well, we can see here we're writing a referral letter. It actually tells us explicitly. Sometimes it won't be so explicit. Sometimes we'll have to infer from the task what type of letter we have to write. Now, what else? It's going to tell us why we're writing. Let's read it. A letter of referral for further investigation and a definitive diagnosis. This is why we're writing to Dr. Jason Roberts, okay? So this task here has told us several pieces of information that are absolutely critical to writing a correct and accurate and relevant letter, okay? Cool. We'll look at that a little bit more in a second. All right, then we're going to look at the case notes, and we need to interpret the case notes correctly, because if you interpret them incorrectly, well, you're going to put incorrect information into your letter. So let's have a look at this little snippet of case notes. First of all, we can see a date there. It says 22nd of February, 2018. Okay, so we know that this patient visited us on this date. That's important. We can also see a range of abbreviations. We can also notice that the case notes are not grammatical sentences. Some of them, in fact, are, well, let's have a look at some of these, for example. Look at this one here, how confusing this is. That is clearly not a grammatical sentence in English. This contains a range of little pieces of information that that you have to interpret correctly. Dysphagia for solids, okay? Onset 252. What about OTC? Do you know these abbreviations? I think these are common abbreviations. You should know these common abbreviations. But the point here is that you need to read these and you need to interpret them correctly, okay? Cool. That leads us to the next part of the method, which is selecting relevant case notes. So on test day, in your mind or actually on the piece of paper, you can do this. You can put ticks next to those that are relevant and you can cross out those that are irrelevant. Or you can just do this mentally if you like. But how do we gauge what is a relevant case note and how do we know what is an irrelevant case note? It all depends, again, on the task. Remember, you're writing to a gastroenterologist. You're writing for further investigation and a definitive diagnosis. Okay, so depending on who you're writing to and why, you can then go ahead and select relevant case notes. You can eliminate irrelevant case notes. And you, of course, what's going on here is the OET examiners have put in irrelevant case notes, not to, I guess, maybe to trick you, okay? Because you will be penalized for including irrelevant case notes. Plus, the word length of 180 to 200 words. I'll get to that in a second as well. Okay, I think you get the idea about selecting relevant case notes. Next step is to organize them. In fact, step 4 and 5 here happen simultaneously. You organize and transform at the same time. But let's just look at step number 4 here, organizing case notes logically. Here's a little activity. I want you to tell me which paragraph is better organized. Which one is better organized, paragraph A or B? All right, you should have got that. Well, let's just read them both. Okay, logical organization. Let's read paragraph A. Mrs. Smith has been suffering from a lingering lump in her throat for the past fortnight that may be the result of smoking. She first complained of the lump 3 weeks ago. Since then, the lump has become more noticeable. You can see how well these sentences flow from one to the next. You can see how the name Mrs. Smith then becomes she in the second sentence. And again, well, actually, yeah, she's not called the lump in the third sentence. That's the lump. We're talking about her throat lump. You can see how the ideas flow from one to the next in a logical way. Let's look at paragraph B. Mrs. Smith has been suffering from a lingering lump in her throat for the past fortnight that may be the result of smoking. She has a sore tooth, which is now loose. She sometimes walks her dog on the beach with her husband. I know this might seem a little bit patronizing because it's just so clear as to which one is a bad paragraph, but trust me, we see a lot of people writing disorganized paragraphs and including lots of different ideas into the one paragraph. It's hard to read. You need to think to yourself, okay, I'm sending this letter to the gastroenterologist or the dermatologist or the oncologist or whoever. The information needs to be very clear in each paragraph. Each paragraph should have a theme, okay? And the ideas should flow from one to the next and then into the next theme. They should flow from one to the next. I hope everything's okay on YouTube. I think it was lagging a little bit. All right, all good. Cool. So, yes, that's the wrong one. Let's look at the next part, which is transforming case notes accurately. This is about grammar, really. This is about using precise, accurate vocabulary and grammar. So, this is an example of bad transformation. Mrs. Smoth has suffered from lingering lump in his throat since the past fortnight that may be a result of smoking. She first complained of lump 3 weeks ago. Since then, lumps has become more notice. Okay, so here's a tip. Grammar only accounts for 20% of your grade, but if your grammar is so bad that it actually changes the meaning of what you're trying to say, then that will affect your score a lot more. So here's a few little tips from bad grammar that you need to pick up. First of all, get the name of the patient right. Copy it exactly. It's not Mrs. Smoth, it's Mrs. Smith. You need to get that right. Make sure you get the title right. You're also graded on salutations and titles. Capital letter for her family name. Okay, it's Mrs. Family Name. Verbs, get these verbs right. We have a video on the E2 language platform about OET verbs. Has suffer, has suffered, is suffering, will suffer, suffered, has been suffering. All different types of verbs. Get the verb right. From lingering lump in, okay, if it's Mrs. Smith, it's going to have to be her. Her throat. Okay, get your prepositions right. For the past fortnight, that may be the result of smoking. She first complained of the lump 3 weeks. Plural noun, plural nouns. Since then, the lump, not plural, has become more noticeable. There's lots of little errors in here, right? Cool. So make sure your transformation is good. Here's the good paragraph on the left. There's the bad paragraph on the right. Okay. Next, number 6, the body, 180 to 200 words. Well, that all depends on this. If you've written more than 200 words, you've included irrelevant case notes. If your letter is too short, if you've written less than 180 words in the body of your letter, you have left out important case notes, or your sentences are not long enough. If you've written between 180 to 200 words, you have included all of the relevant case notes and you've written the correct amount of text in your letter, okay? So too long, too short, just right. It all depends on which case notes you have included or whether you've left them out. Now, when I say body of letter, that means, so up the top of the letter, you have the date and the address and the name of the doctor and the name of the hospital. And then it says, Dear Dr. Smith, regarding patient X. Is it the first? I think I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, whether it starts with Dear Dr. Smith or whether it starts with the introductory paragraph. But either way, that's only about 10 words. So that's not too bad. I can't confirm that because I actually can't find the source of what officially is the body of the letter. I can tell you this though, the OET are not so strict on word count like the IELTS. In the IELTS, if you write just below the word count, you will be penalized heavily. In the OET, they sort of, there's a little bit of give and take. But anyway, forget the address in the top bit, just count the middle section, excluding your name and the yours sincerely. That counts for the body of the letter. And that's what should be between 180 to 200 words, okay? Again, selecting case notes is critical. Here's the super tip for writing. This is the most important tip. That is that you complete the task. What do I mean by that? Again, who are you writing to? Think about that. What information are you going to include for that person, and why are you writing to them? Are you writing to them for a definitive diagnosis? Are you writing to them for a second opinion? Are you writing to them for help? Okay, these questions and that task are the most important part of OET writing. I should also include another tip here, which is don't go in with memorized templates, okay? OET examiners are very smart. If you've gone in there and you've just memorized a template and you're just filling up the words, the OET examiner will know immediately that you are not able to be flexible with your language, and they'll grade you down. You need to write the letter and be flexible. You need to look at that task and write the letter according to the task, not to something that you've memorized from last week, okay? So be flexible on test day. Just complete the task. That's all you need to do. Complete the task. That's the critical bit. All right, cool. Let's look at reading part A. I did a survey recently on Facebook, by the way, and I asked OET participants which was the most terrifying of the subtests, and everyone said reading part A, like significant numbers said reading part A was the most difficult and scared them the most. So let's have a look at this one here. We'll do a quick overview. You'll get 4 short texts and you have a summary of around 30 gaps. You have 15 minutes to complete the gaps. You have to just go. So let me give you some tips about this one. Tip number 1, you need to scan read those 4 texts before you begin filling the gaps, okay? Scan read. That means speed read. It means very quickly read in about a minute or 2. You need to identify those 4 texts. What are they? Is it a Q&A? Is it an abstract? Is it a research report? Is it statistics? Is it a definition? Okay, identify the different text types. Notice the headings and the subheadings. Pay attention to those headings and subheadings of each text. Notice the keywords in each text, because each text will be about a different thing. They might all be related to, say, asthma, for example, but one of the texts might be talking about symptoms of asthma, okay? The statistics might be talking about prevalence of asthma. The research abstract might be talking about asthma in young people or children or something like that, okay? So they're all about asthma, but each text will be about a different aspect. And you need to know that, because when you're looking at the summary, it's going to be talking about children's asthma, and you go, okay, I know which one that was. It was text number 3, okay? All right, so this is what the 4 texts might look like. Obviously, this is too small to read, but you can see the differences there. You can see up in the top left at text A1 is a Q&A. Text A2 beneath that is statistics, and more specifically, it's the leading causes of death in Australia, for example. Text A3 looks like a bit of a research abstract with an objective, a method, results, and conclusions. And the last one there is treatments. So it's different medications and therapies, for example. So you need to scan read those, identify the texts, identify the headings and subheadings, and have a quick read to notice keywords. So then you know where to go when you read that summary. So let's think about the summary now. Of course, you need to look at the summary. Each paragraph in the summary will relate to 1 or 2 texts. Let me tell you that again, because that's important. So when you're looking at the summary, there might be 4 paragraphs, right, in that summary. Let's think about the first paragraph. the information to fill that first paragraph will usually come from two texts, maybe A1 and A3, right? The first half of the paragraph will come from A1, the second half will come from A3. And there are hints in the paragraph that tell you which text to look for. For example, let's say you're looking at the first paragraph of the summary and it says something about research participants. Which text are you going to look at if it says research participants? Well, you're going to look at the abstract, the research abstract, because that's usually where people talk about participants. Let's say you're looking at the first paragraph of the summary and it says something like 76%. Okay, well, you're probably going to go to that line graph and look in the statistics part, okay? That's where that gap will be found, okay? So let's have a closer look. So each paragraph will relate to 1 to 2 texts. Take the word from the text, but remember, you may have to transform it to fit grammatically. Okay, so let's think about this. This is the paragraph, for example, in the summary. For example, let's say that gaps 1 and 2 come from text A1, and let's say that gaps 3 and 4 come from text A3. Okay, let me just tell you how this transformation happens. So rather than one specific condition, dementia is the name given to a group of, let's say we found this in text A1 and it said symptom. Okay, now, can we put that directly into this gap? Well, a group of symptom, something's wrong. We're going to, in order to make it fit this gap, we're going to have to make it a plural noun and put the S on the end. Now it fits grammatically. Okay, although something is a common symptom, let's just say in the text it says forgetful. Okay, can we fit forgetful in there? Although forgetful is a common symptom, well, that's not going to fit. We're going to have to transform this into forgetfulness and make it a noun. Although forgetfulness is a common symptom, blah, blah, blah. Here's another little tip for you. It can be one word, it can be 2 words, or it can be 3 words max. Okay? 1, 2, or 3 words can fit in each of the gaps. And you have to transform it to make it fit grammatically. Okay, I think that's clear. Here's the super tip for reading part A. This is the thing that you need to have in your mind on test day. This is what you need to do, okay? You need to complete the entire summary before time runs out. I know that seems sort of obvious, but it's not. What people do, the big mistake that people do in reading part A is they think they need to be very careful and they think they need to get every one right, okay? But remember, you've got 15 minutes to finish this part of the test. And some of these gaps can be guessed from context. You can actually just look at that gap. Not many, it makes it hard. But what you need to do in this is not be careful in reading part A. You need to be not careless. What's the right word? You need to be, let's just say, fast. And maybe in being fast, you're going to be a little bit reckless. But that's what you need to do. You need to, your objective for this part of the test is to make sure you fill all 30 of those gaps before the time runs out. If you fill 15, you will not get a B. You will not. Even if you get all 15 correct, you will not. So if you fill 30, then you might get 20 right, and that might push you into a B. Okay, so that's your objective. I hope that's in your head. Listening part A, let's have a quick look at this one. It's a dialogue between 2 people. It's divided into sections. You need to take notes on each section. So here are the tips. The title of each section tells you what to listen for. So make sure you read that title. Number 2, the number of lines determines the number of key points to note down. What do I mean by that? Well, what are you going to be listening for here? You're going to be listening for details of the incident, or it might say something like symptoms, or it might say something like doctor's suggestions. Okay, you keep that in your mind while you listen. Now, how many key points do you have to note down here? 1, 2? No, there's 5 dot points there. You need to note down 5 key points. Here's some important tips. They're not necessarily super tips, but they're certainly important. You are not penalized for writing irrelevant information onto those lines. So if you do include a point that is not technically an answer, you're not penalized for it. That's fine. The second thing that's important is you can write whichever key point on whichever line. So let's go back and look at this. Let's say details of the incident. Well, let's say husband was out. Okay, husband out. Whatever it was, phone rang. Dizzy. Okay, these are sort of the case notes, so the notes that you need to write. Now, if you wrote husband out on this line here, and you wrote phone rang on this line here, it's still correct. Doesn't matter which line you write it on. Okay, let's say you include some irrelevant information. Dizzy and walked to phone. Let's say walk to phone is irrelevant. It's not actually the answer. Well, it's still be technically correct because you got the point, the main point there, which is dizzy. Okay, and you need to make sure that you fill this one and this one as well with a point. Cool. Speaking. Let's have a quick look at the speaking task. You're given a role play card. You're the medical professional or the medical person, and you'll be talking to a patient. Now, the patient might be, it's going to change. You're going to do 2 role plays. The first one, of course, the person you're talking to doesn't change. It might be a 40-year-old woman that you're talking to, the OET person, but she'll be role playing perhaps a 17-year-old boy, which would be weird. Actually, maybe the gender stays the same. I don't know. Yeah, probably stays the same. I think that'd be really weird otherwise. Anyway, and then in the next role play, she's playing a 90-year-old woman. So, okay, that changes there. You have 5 minutes per role play. So you have to speak, you have to go for 5 minutes, which sometimes is a bit tough because the role play card sort of lacks information that you can push on for 5 minutes. Here's a little tip along the way, which is if you run out of time, if you've finished the role play and there's sort of some awkward silence at the end, summarize what you've talked about, okay? Say, okay, I'll take this opportunity to summarize what we've discussed in this, in this discussion, and then you just go over what you've said. Okay, so you'll get 2 role plays. Now, let me give you some tips for this one. The role play card. So this is what the role play card looks like. You can see it says candidate card. So this is for you. This one's specifically for a doctor. Okay, you've got a setting. You get 2 minutes to prepare, by the way. 2 minutes to prepare. And you hold this role play card in your hand while you give the role play. So the setting, the suburban general practice. So it's not an emergency room. So that will give you some indication of what's about to happen. Here's the scenario, which is the background information that you need about the patient and whether you know the patient or not, what's wrong with the patient, etc. And then you've got the tasks. And the tasks are in dot point form, and you need to systematically work through these tasks one by one. And the most important thing about this entire role play card are the verbs. Right at the beginning of each task, find out, advise, explain, reassure, provide recommendations. Focus on these verbs during your role play. This is what ought to guide you through the role play, and this is what you need to do. These are the do statements, if you like. Okay, so here's some tips. You take control. Okay, even though you're the one being tested on your English language skills, it's a role play. You're the doctor, you're the nurse, you're the physio. You take control of the role play. Don't wait for them to start the role play. I mean, of course, the examiner say, okay, you can begin. But as soon as you begin, you become the medical professional and say, hello, Mrs. Smith, it's nice to see you again. I understand you've been having some complications with blah, blah, blah. Okay. Or maybe you don't know Mrs. Smith and you say, hello there, my name's Roger. Can I please have your name? Or what should I call you? And then starts the role play. Tip number 2, listen to the patient. Although this is a speaking test, listening is absolutely critical in this. You are definitely evaluated on your ability to listen and respond appropriately to the patient. So it's not all about you speaking. It's about asking questions to the patient. It's about listening to what the patient says and responding appropriately to what they say. What's going to happen on test day is this. You're going to read, speak, listen, speak, read. What do I mean by that? Well, you're holding the role play card. So you're going to be reading, and it's going to say something like, reassure the patient that everything's going to be okay. And you say, listen, Mrs. Smith, I can promise you that this is going to be okay. Everything will work out fine. You just need to take your medication, whatever. So then you speak, you read, you speak. You listen to Mrs. Smith, and she's going to say something. She's going to say, oh, but I'm extremely worried about what happens when I get home and I don't know, blah, 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 blah. So you listen to her, and then you respond to her, and then you look down at your role play card and you look at the next task, okay? And then you do it again, and you just go through this cycle. So it's reading, speaking, listening, responding, reading, and you're just going back and forth like this. There you go. Here's the super tip for speaking. And hopefully this will help you to overcome your anxiety as well, because I really think that this well, I think it's kind of profound or important. Focus on communication, not performance. What I mean by that is, if you don't focus on yourself, don't think of this as a performance where you need to perform well, or, it's not a performance, it's communication. So if you're focusing on the other person instead of yourself, and you're listening to that other person, and when you're speaking to that other person, it will not only relieve your anxiety on test day, but it will actually really improve your speaking score as well, because you'll just do better, because you're actually going to be listening and you're actually going to be speaking, and you're not just sitting there sort of worried about what's being recorded on that whatever it is, that recorder. Cool. That's a good one. Remember this one. Communicate, don't perform. Communicate, don't perform. Here's the OET super duper tip. This is the tip to rule them all. Prepare properly. I'm not sure if you've done that and if you have your test this weekend. If your test is next month, don't wait until the last week. Don't wait until the last few days. Start preparing now. This is a really challenging test that has a very high failure rate, by the way. So you ought to do some good preparation. And that can be done here at E2 Language. We are a premium preparation provider. We're one of the OET's few premium preparation providers. We have a 100% online course. You can access it from anywhere in the world. It focuses on all the different subtests and skill building. We have one-on-one tutorials, writing feedback, lots and lots of materials, heaps of stuff for you to do. Anyway, that's the end of that. I hope you enjoyed that tips lesson. I'm not a big fan of tips, but I thought that might help you. Let's do a Q&A. Jay, is it okay to vary by using the term her patient in order to refer to Mrs. Smith? Okay. No, no, not really. You can just call her Mrs. This is writing, so whether to use Mrs. Smith, and then you can just use the pronouns. Here's how you do it. Paragraph 1, Mrs. Smith visited our clinic on this date, blah, 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 blah. She, blah, 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 blah. She, her, blah, 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 blah. Next paragraph, Mrs. Smith, she, her. Next paragraph, Mrs. Smith, she, her. That's how you do it. What if there's no specific title before the patient's name? Can I use her first name instead, like Lisa Smith? Can I use Lisa came in? Yes, usually they will give you a title, but yes, you can just use first name in that case. And if it's a young person, let's say like teenager or young, a boy or a girl, you just use the first name. And master, I've seen a lot of Indians use master. I think that's a bit of an archaic term. So we just use the first name, would be more formally appropriate. In a writing subtest for nurses, we are addressing a letter for home care visit, whether we need to write the patient's address and if needed, where should we be written? Okay. Okay, so you're writing to a home care nurse. Let's say that the home care nurse has never seen this patient before. So you're introducing this patient, in which case it would be a good idea to put the patient's address. Where to put it? I would say probably at the end of the letter. I would say something like, thanks very much for your cooperation. Mrs. Smith's address is 55 blah blah street blah blah. That's fine. Jay, which one is better in reading part A, starting from the last or the first? Definitely starting from scan reading the texts. If you start from the summary, you have no idea where the information is to fill those gaps, okay? And so you're just blind. But if you scan read those texts and you notice the headings and the subheadings and which text they are, then you go to the summary, boom, you know exactly where to go to find that. So yeah, that's the method. Jay, if I take 6 notes in listening part A and there are only 5 lines at that time, what we'll do, I just told you that actually, so I'm not going to go back. You can watch this one again. In speaking, do we need to know the scenario straight away? Like I see here that you are experiencing blah, blah, or can we include it in the task? Yeah, okay, so the scenario part of the speaking on the role play card, the scenario gives you all the background information. Whether it tells you whether you know the patient, it tells you what's wrong with the patient. So in that case, let's say you do know the patient, and let's say it's in a retirement home, and the patient's just been returned to the retirement home, and you're monitoring whatever. So you'll say, hello, Mrs. Smith, it's nice to see you again. I understand you just spent some time in hospital. It's good to have you back. Now, I've got some questions about blah, 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 okay? So that background paints that scenario. Do we need to write the exact discharge date? Should be in the introduction or conclusion. Okay, let's say you're writing a discharge letter, okay? It distinctly says in the task you're writing a discharge letter, or it infers that it says something like, you know, Mrs. Smith will be returned to her nursing home today, or something like that. And you're writing to the manager of the nursing home, for example. So, or she'll be discharged tomorrow. Okay, so that should probably go in the introduction. And you'll say, dear Mrs. Manager of the nursing home, patient Mrs. Smith will be discharged tomorrow after blah, 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 blah. Yes, that should definitely go in the introductory paragraph. Jay, what's the order of each subtest on the exam day? I don't actually know that. So if somebody can put that into the chat, that would be good. All right, let me go to YouTube Live and answer any questions. Just want to see 160, and how many people have we got in here? 160 and 56. Wow, we've got over 200 people, well over 200 people. That's awesome. Okay. How is the listening scored? Well, you're scored on just, let's say there are 4 dot points. Did you write down 4 main points? Were they the right ones? You get 4 points. I don't know technically how it's scored, but that's basically how it's scored. In writing, can I put a period after Mr., Mrs.? That's, you can, or you doesn't matter, doesn't matter. What is the maximum word count in reading and listening? I'm not sure what you mean there. In reading part A, you have a maximum of 3 words per gap. I'm not sure what you mean. Is grammar important in listening part A? No, because it's note form. So that's good, isn't it? I hope you can give an example of a sample letter or different other person in the hospital, ET dietitian. Oh, that's what you mean by word count. How long is the passages? Yes. Okay. So reading part B is 600 to 800 words. And you'll have usually around 10 questions. Okay. If you're referring a baby to a maternity nurse, how do you address the baby? Just by the first name. In part A of listening, the note taking, can we rephrase what we hear? Yes, there are many different ways to write those notes. That's correct. So let's say it's listening part A, and and let's say, the old woman's talking to the doctor and she says something like, I had a dizzy spell, something dizzy spell. She says dizzy spell. If you wrote dizziness or temporary dizziness or something like that, that would also be fine. But I'd suggest probably just to copy the exact phrase that the patient or doctor uses onto your notes. Will I be penalized if my word count in writing will be more than 200 but less than 210? No, I don't think it'll only, you're not actually penalized on word counts. You're penalized on inclusion or exclusion of case notes. You're penalized if you exclude irrelevant case notes, and you're given, I can't think of the opposite of that. My brain just went dead, but you get my point. If a patient came into the hospital and discharged the same day, that's actually quite funny. Just be careful with your verbs of discharge. Hopefully the patient didn't discharge in the hospital, was discharged. How do we write that? Oh, okay. So the patient visited today and was discharged on the same day. There you go. That's how you write that, I guess, on the same day. Is it in writing you're not supposed to note while we scan? If so, how about the address? And I'm not sure what you mean there, Deepak. You'll have to rephrase that one. How many items we need to get to B grade in listening? Not sure. Nobody knows. Okay, somebody's writing with the re-patient 70 years old with dashes or 70-year-old. Just write age 70, aged with a D, 70, and then you just don't have to worry about the hyphens and the correct plural noun. Jay, after the salutation, don't worry about that. Is word form important in listening, such as adjective, verbs, or past tense? Kind of. Like it, for example, there's a big difference in meaning between had headaches and is having headaches, right? One is in the past, discontinued. One is happening now, continuing now. So yeah, be a little bit careful of your verbs, for example. Can we use a pencil in writing? I'm not sure. I think they supply you with the pen or pencil. The test starts with listening, reading, writing, and then speaking last. Listening first, then reading, then writing, then speaking. Okay, cool. Thanks for that, Florica. That's nice. Prince says, best of luck to all my dear friends who are going to appear for the next test on this weekend. I agree. Thank you, Prince. That's cool. Can we still look at the same case notes even after the 5 minutes time given us to read it? Yes, you get to keep the case notes. After 5 minutes, they don't take them. You keep them, and so then you write like that. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't taken the OET. Hi, Jay. Instead of writing full address and contact number, can we write address and contact number is enclosed with this letter? Well, it depends how relevant and important it is, okay? So again, you need to think about who you're writing to, what to include, and why you're writing to them, okay? That will include and exclude certain information. Jay, I enrolled in E2 language, but in writing section, the sample letters are not relevant to my profession. What should I do? Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Our course is for nurses, but what you can do is this. If you're a doctor, say, it's the same method. You're graded the same way. Nurses, doctors, physios, vets, dietitians are all graded on the same criteria, okay? So the method you use, the interpreting, selecting, organizing, transforming, is the same for all professions. So even though the case notes and the sample letters on E2 language are for nurses, we're writing doctors' case notes now, by the way. The method's exactly the same, so it's still really good practice. Listening, reading, and speaking are also totally applicable. So I suggest still doing the practice. Are we allowed to write or underline keywords in the reading questionnaire? Yes. What's a replacement for I am writing to blah, blah, blah? Well, you can put it in the passive. You can say something like, Mrs. Smith will be discharged tomorrow, something like that. Reading part A versus reading part B in terms of value. Is it 50-50% or 33-66%? I can't remember off the top of my head, I'm sorry. Just try and get full marks in each. In listening part A, can we rephrase what we hear? I've answered that one. Okay, Vincent's got a good replacement for I am writing to X. Vincent says, this letter is to refer or inform. That's a good one. Thanks, Vincent. That's good. Jay, which part of the summary in reading part A is easy to get? Whether start from, okay, I've answered that one. Cool. All right, guys, I think let me just go back to the Zoom and answer. Okay, Anju. Jay, in reading part A, the first paragraph is often tougher than the other paragraphs. So should we start from the last paragraph or start from the first? I suggest starting from the first, but what you can do is skip gaps that you get stuck on and come back to them later, okay? Remember, 15 minutes is so precious. So let's say you get stuck on that first gap and you spend 30 seconds looking and you're just like, no, I don't know. Leave it. Go to the next one. Got it. Next one. Got it. Then let's say you go to the end and you've got like 4 or 5 gaps. Then you'll go back to that first one. You go, I saw that before. Fill it. Boom, like that. It's much harder than what I say, by the way. It's challenging, really challenging. In the listening, if the answer is like this, gnawing sharp, then I answered the bullets separately. Will I get 1 score or 2? Again, you just need to get all of the key points. Doesn't matter which one you put them on. Lexi Joseph, to get B grade, how many answers? I'm not sure. Usmi, in writing a referral letter, what should be the time of referral letter writing? Either you consider yourself in the situation or according to the exam date. Okay, great. So what's really confusing with OET writing practice materials is the date, because they're how can I explain this? The date that you write on your letter in the exam is the date of the exam, right? So let's say you're taking the OET on the 10th of March. So the first thing you write up the top of your letter will be 10th of March or 10th of the 3rd, 2018. And so all of those case notes will be contemporary. They're not going to be from the past, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I hope that's clear. Just remember the practice case notes are outdated. It is confusing though. Okay, cool. I think that's all. Thanks very much for coming along. For those of you taking the exam on Saturday, I wish you all the very best of luck. For those of you who are taking the exam in April or May, I suggest you start preparing properly. Yes, and I also suggest that E2 Language is a very, very good preparation website where we have all of the information, practice tests, and everything that you need. Okay, cool. See you. Good luck.